Hello, my name is Dr. Thomas Maples, and for those of you who have joined me in the past, I welcome you back. And for those of you, if this is your first time with me, I welcome you, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Please feel free to type them in, and I'll respond as necessary when I receive questions from you, the audience. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about communication, especially communication as it relates between children and parents. A lot of times, when I grew up, it was in the 1980s, and I remember a video from the rapper Will Smith, well, then rapper Will Smith, now very famous actor, who sang a great little clip that just seemed to permeate the teenage generation at the time that parents just don't understand. And this brought me to today's clip, which is really how to open the door of communication with your children so they believe that you do understand them and that you're coming from a point that's empathic to the plights they undertake to grow up and to become their own individuated beings. So, for today, what we're going to talk about is a little bit about first how communication patterns could create barriers between people, and then secondarily, ways that we as parents can begin to work on ourselves as well as our children in opening the doors to a more healthy communication pattern. So this morning I was working with my son who, like most children, doesn't like going to school. And he's unable really to express himself as it relates to what he feels about school, even though he knows that there are certain aspects of it that he doesn't like. And so, a lot of times, what happens with children is their communication becomes broken because really they don't know how to translate the feelings that they have into words. They know something may feel wrong and they don't like it, but they can't say that I feel nervous because of this test, or I'm scared because of what will happen at recess when I go to play with my friends. And so a lot of times they just feel a sense of overwhelm and those feelings because they don't have the emotional intelligence yet developed. They become bottlenecked and basically they aren't able to express them out. And so part of what we have to do as parents is really begin to educate our children on the emotions that they feel, as well as ways that we have in the past overcome those emotions. And so this is the beginning part of teaching your children empathic response. They don't know the emotions that they go through solely because they haven't been exposed to it for the longevity that we have, and they really haven't formed a vocabulary around their emotions per se. They could say they feel bad. They could say they could cry. They a lot of times you'll see it come out in physical reactions like crying or yelling or going to their bedroom or slamming doors. They can't state that necessarily I'm angry or I'm frustrated or I hurt inside because someone hurt my feelings, because they haven't had the longevity of being able to work out their emotions as we have. And so when we see that they get into an emotional state, part of what our job is as being practical parents is to help them to identify what emotion is there. They may simply say, I don't know. And that's fine. That's fine. They don't have to know. So we need to ask them very poignant questions. Do you feel sad when this happens? Are you upset when this happens? Do you feel anxious? Oh, if you feel anxious, is it in your tummy? Is it in your heart? Is it in your throat? And this begins to help them identify the physiological symptoms or sensations they feel as it relates to the general feeling state that they are in. And then once they have enough practice with identifying it, oh, my stomach's sort of queasy and my heart's pounding, I must be a little anxious right now. Now they could identify the emotion and they could therefore repeat it to you as their parents or a professional that they may see, or even with their teacher or group, any adult that could help them begin to work through that feeling. because this is something we all had to undertake when we were growing up. We just simply forgot because the process of growing up is pretty traumatic for anyone. And so what happens is we develop more of an emotional intelligence and the ability to identify emotions on the spot. We end up having the capacity to communicate those emotions with others, which in turn not only helps others to empathize with the journey that we're undergoing as children, but also allows children to begin to develop the empathic response to identify emotions they have as it relates to others and to try and communicate this. This is the basic building blocks of the communication door in practical parenting. And so, how do we work with our children as it relates to their emotions? I created an acronym a while back that really, I think, nails it as it relates to helping children understand the capacity they have to create their own emotional experience. And the acronym is simply CREATE. It stands for calmness, rocket, evaluate and empathize, amplify, team up, and empathize again. Whenever a child approaches you emotionally, it's usually a charged event. Emotions are charged. They're energy, and they could be a wonderful charged feeling like love or happiness, and it can make you feel warm and want more of it. Or it could be a very negative charged event such as anger or fear, where the feeling is disrupting and nevertheless it's still moving you, but it's a very negative feeling. And so what happens with emotions is they're charged. We either charge them positively or we charge them negatively, depending on the feeling that we get in the body. And our body is either reacting to this also. And so one of the first things we need to do as practical parents is to really be calm as it relates to the emotions that our children present. Because children don't know about their emotions and don't know how to express them in words per se, they have a certain degree of emotional lability. Their emotions are expressed through action, not necessarily in words. And they're especially as they're developing in adolescence and late childhood, their bodies are literally ripping apart, and so is their psychology in a way. I think it was best shown in the movie Inside Out, where the main character, Rylan, got a new emotional motherboard instead of the smaller one that she had as a child. This one had a whole new set of emotions that were present that she didn't know necessarily how to deal with, which were an intermixture of, let's say, anger and disgust, or love and sadness, things to that nature. And so literally as the psychology and the physiology rips apart for us to grow up, we have to be a source of calmness for our children. We have to be the person that they could turn to in order to learn how to express their emotions and understand that it's not really an individual plight. They're not all alone, but instead this is something we all go through as we yearn to grow up. And as we present this method of calmness around them, and we help to cocoon them through the emotional state, we really have to assume a position of being a rock in this parenting journey. I'm not talking Dwayne Johnson here, but maybe having the rock on your side would be a good role model for kids to look up to. However, we have to be like a rock, and we have to be unwavering in our commitment to our own personal values and the visions that we see our children taking part in. And so what happens is we develop our own sense of values, and we begin to develop the sense of values we want to pass on to our children. These really become the foundation from which they're going to begin to develop their own value system, as well as to pass on that value system eventually to the children they will love. The third part of the CREATE system is to evaluate and empathize. A lot of times children, like I said, they do not know what is going on with them. You have to evaluate what you think is there, and then to ask very simple and concrete questions. Do you feel sad? No. Do you feel anxious? No. Well, are you happy? No. Do you feel blah? Yeah. Okay, well, what's behind that blah? Did you feel that way yesterday? No. And you could make a game out of this. It's really yes, no questions, because they aren't, like I said, going to be able to go deeply into their emotional state. And so when you begin to evaluate, you begin to understand the emotional terrain they're going through. If it's fear, then you could ask questions specifically. Are you afraid to cross the street? Are you afraid to go shopping? Are you afraid to play a video game? And it's very concrete in this method because you're helping them to link the idea of the emotion that's present to the event that caused it. And once they could see the event and how it causes an emotion, you could begin to link it to the behaviors that it fosters as a means to fight or to amplify behaviors depending if they're positive or negative. For instance, if someone becomes fearful in school because they've been bullied and they tend to run away, well, is that a positive or a negative behavior? Maybe the running away was a positive thing for them and it really turned out well. And so that's something that they now have in their tool chest if they ever meet in the bullying behavior again. Secondarily, if the emotion is fear and it's linked to school, and it's linked to school because of the bullying, and then they ended up fighting, but they got suspended, well, is this a bad or a good consequence? It really is a bad consequence in this case, but maybe there is an ulterior aspect of it that the fighting helped keep this child safe, and it had to be conducted at the time to keep them safe from the fear that they have. Because remember, fear elicits fight or flight. And so what you want to do is you want to amplify the positive outcomes with your children. You positively reinforce positive behaviors. That'll lead to a positive outcome. You negatively reinforce negative behaviors, and that usually leads to a positive outcome. If you positively reinforce a negative behavior, i.e., you rewards the child for being suspended, you're going to have a negative outcome because they're going to think, okay, this is good behavior. If you negatively reinforce a positive behavior, sort of you punish them because they stood up for themselves, then you end up getting a negative consequence in the future as well. And so what we're doing in the evaluate and empathize, we're linking the feeling with the event and then what caused the event, and then we're moving it more into the behavior that occurred and what the consequence is. And this is the chain that we could really work with children on to begin to learn about their emotional states, their thoughts, what triggered them, and how ultimately to begin working through them and reinforcing the positive outcomes and the negative outcomes they've incurred. All the while, we're empathizing with them. We're teaching them that emotions are okay and that we make mistakes. The fourth part that I look at is the amplification. Children's traits are positive or negative, and we really want to amplify these. We want to bring out those positive traits and really help them to foster more of them. We want them to find themselves in a positive place. We want them to better themselves. We want them to feel confident in themselves. If there is negative traits, we do have to negatively reinforce those, but it doesn't have to always be through punishment. Some of the ways that, because a lot of times we could have mixed circumstances. Take, for instance, someone stands up to a bully, fights, and then gets suspended. Is that right? Absolutely not. Maybe the bully was pushing them and hitting them first. Is it right to hit back? Absolutely not. But in this case, it kept the child safe. And so with this, you got a neutral event. There's really not much you could do for it because people have to stick up for themselves. They have to either fight or flight. But what we can do is amplify the positive traits. You know what? You stood up for yourself. Good job. You know what? He probably isn't going to pick on you anymore. She's not going to pick on you. But secondarily, what ends up happening is you could say, you did this, which is right, but you did get in trouble because you engaged in the same behavior that they did. You're already punished for that behavior. But what are your other options? And so here you could begin to amplify your child's capacity to problem solve for themselves. And that's really what you're wanting to do. What I asked my son today was, what do you plan on doing with this? How are you going to solve this? What are you going to do? How's it going to happen? And it began to put the pressure onto him to begin to problem solve for himself. And either way, he's now engaged in thinking about what he has to do, not thinking about what mama or papa has to do for him. And this is how we begin to build and amplify a child's natural capacity to grow. This leads into the fifth part, which is really teaming up. It takes a village to raise a child. I'll repeat it again. It takes a village to raise a child. We need a team. Okay. We need to team up with others that know more about childhood development. We need to team up with their teachers. We need to team up with their counselors. We need to team up with the people that are involved in their life. We need to team up with their friends' parents. We need to team up with the community at large, because these are the entities that are helping us to raise our children growing up. And if we have a problem with aspects in this team, we need to sit down and openly communicate it, because these are the values we're passing on to our children. And so as we begin to team up, remember, together, everyone achieves more. Team. Together, everyone achieves more. And what happens, even if we have disagreements, we have to show them communication patterns that will help them navigate through the disagreements. We have to show them ways to overcome disagreements as a means to reunify and move forward to a greater cause. And this is the aspect of the team, because after we team up with our community and we create the village that's going to help us to raise a child, we need to go back to step 3, which is to empathize again with their journey. As Will Smith said, parents just don't understand. I wonder if he still has that same sentiment as a parent. I'm sure a little bit of it is still there, but I'm sure it maybe shifted a little because now he's in the parental role. Your children want you to understand their journey. Can you remember the acne, the supreme growth spurts that happen, the growing pains, the fitting in, the bullying, the calling names, the thinking, do I fit in this right? That all occurs during adolescence? Probably not. It's one of those things that we tend to block out, and we block it out for a reason. We block it out because it's an uncomfortable feeling that we all went through. We weren't self-assured at that time. We were growing. We didn't know who we were becoming. Body functions end up happening that we had no clue about only a few years prior. And so what happens with this is we need to empathize with their journey. I mean, this is something we all went through. It's why we could look back on our own like, oh, you know what? I sort of remember that. We look back at our own childhood and like, wow, my son reminds me of this. And, oh, I remember that. And so as we begin to empathize, we could show them that we truly do want to team up with them. We want to be calm. We want to be compassionate. We want to be the rock for them to begin to explore the outside world. That rock always stays the same. No matter what currents that they push against, that rock remains stationary, and they can't really wear it down. Even in nature, it takes millions of years for water to wear a rock down. And so by being calm and being that rock, we could help them to evaluate and to empathize with their environment. We could help them to explore their environment. And that amplifies their natural personality growth. I mean, this is what it's all about. We want them to be healthy, psychological, and we want them to be healthy, value-based children. We want them to move forward, to advance confidently in the direction of their dreams, to achieve their dreams, to dream life forward. This is the aspect of life where we open the doors for our children to be anything or accomplish anything they may want. We want to amplify their dreams, and we want to help team up with them to it. And last but not least, we want to empathize with their journey. So if you hear the alarm in the background, that is the building with the fire alarm. And so I wish to say, until the next time we meet, which will be next week, I bid you adieu, and I hope you advance confidently in the direction of your dreams. Thank you.